can't believe it's been over a week since I've set foot into the garden dome. And today's the first examination I'm doing since we left on vacation 1 week ago today. So I want to show you how things have performed as well as the automatic watering setup that I put into place before we left. So first things first, let's check out the flowers. When I stepped foot inside the dome this morning, I was struck immediately by how awesome the flowers have looked since I've been gone. And I guess I was anticipating a little bit of loss, a little bit of slowing down of the blooms, but that hasn't happened at all. In fact, I did some major pruning before I left. These pansies were covered in aphids, so I cut them all back and did an aphid treatment, and in 1 week's time, they've completely returned. The petunias have more blooms than I've ever seen, and it's really exciting, as well as the osteospermum. This is kind of like a daisy, and I was delighted to see how many blooms there were. The geraniums look great, and a lot of my houseplants that I moved into the dome are doing really well. And look at that mandarin. It's not blooming, but it's definitely blushing, turning orange. And on the other side, it gets even better. First of all, my coneflower bloomed. I was watching this plant really closely before I left, and it was just starting to get a flower head, and the full bloom came out this past week. The pink geraniums are popping, and the snapdragons are looking excellent. And these also had an aphid problem before I left. I did a spray treatment with neem oil, and it's definitely helped things stay under control. I did see a few more aphids this morning when I came in, but I just did another spray treatment. And my favorite is the Calabrachoa. These had so many blooms on it. The big ones, the orange ones, and look at these variegated ones. They were so pretty. I've never seen this many blooms on the flower. I'm just so excited. And the lantana looks awesome, and so does the salvia. I definitely deadheaded a lot of the salvia before I left, and I'm super pleased with how it's looking right now. I couldn't be happier with how things did. But let's take a look at the vegetables, because that's the other thing that I really wanted to keep alive while we were gone, and I didn't want to take any chances. So the beets look about as awesome as they've looked all summer. Definitely could harvest some more, or just the beet greens, but I had a lot of arugula, a lot of baby arugula. Let's check it out. So in 1 week's time, it went from baby arugula to full-grown arugula, and it was struggling with aphids, but I'm only finding one aphid here and there as of looking at it and doing a close examination this morning. Definitely happy that my watering system definitely kept this arugula alive. It's about time to pull the squash out. As you can see, the summer squash definitely has the mildew issue, but not much more growing in there. I think it's safe to say that time is up for that. And on this side, I had planted some garlic here about a month ago, and I finally got some garlic scapes. I don't think that the garlic is going to grow cloves because it's too hot in here, but it's always nice to have some flavorful scapes. Now, the kale is looking awesome. It's definitely looking like a shrub. It was a little spindly before I left, but it's filled out remarkably. Amazingly, the basil is still producing. I'm going to make a whole batch of pesto with this week. And tomatoes, well, they're not producing quite as much, but there's still some ripening. And it looks like since I was gone, some of the peppers are ripening. None of these were ripe before I left. All these vegetables are doing so well because of the automated watering system I put into place. Now, I didn't have everything on automated watering because a lot of these things are in pots, a lot of trees in pots, a lot of plants still hanging pots. And so I did have my neighbor come over and looked after things. So she did tend to some items that needed some hand watering, but all of this irrigation that you see next to me is the rain point watering system. So it is essentially a water timer which goes to the spigot, and this has 3 different hoses. I took one off because I hooked up my regular hose, but you can water 3 different zones, set timing for 3 different zones. So I had each of my beds, this bed on a zone, the central bed, and then the outer bed. It did a really good job, and things are looking better than they did before I left. And that's something that, when you can say that, you know a product is really worth its weight in salt, and so is your house sitter, right? So our greenhouse sitter, she definitely kept an eye on things that weren't able to get watered. As far as the pond goes, I've been using some more water clarifying, some more barley extract, to help clarify the pond, because it is getting too much sun right now and there's not very much plant coverage. A lot of the plants were kind of dying off with the cooler weather. So I think over the winter I might cover a lot of this with some styrofoam to kind of keep the sun rays out and keep the algae down. That's sort of my strategy. I definitely had peak clarity after we covered the whole thing with a tarp, but I think maybe an easier way to do that would be to float some big sheets of styrofoam to keep those sun rays from really filling up the pond with a lot of algae. So that's my strategy coming up, at least until we get the deck built. A lot of people wonder, can you have a dome like this? Can you have a huge responsibility like this and still go on vacation? And I would say the answer is yes, with some careful planning. So the biggest thing that helped was the irrigation system. And then there was 15-foot spacer hose. Now these spacer hoses had to go all the way to the next bed. So I had to bridge this gap, this walkway gap, and then the gap between that bed and this bed. So I needed to have that green hose, and then the green hose connected to the soaker hose. And the soaker hose is more of like a mesh that lets water seep out. And I just kind of snaked it in all the way around all of my flowers here, all the way on this bed, looped it all around here. You can see it more clearly because there's less foliage over here. All around the kale. It was looped all the way back through the garlic and the onions and the squash, all the way back through the flowers. And it did an entire loop all the way back to in front of the palm tree. It was about 100 feet of soaker, or it was about 75 feet of soaker hose, a 50-foot section and a 25-foot section. And so that was what I used to water the central dome. Now the outside dome, I used a 50-foot length of soaker hose. So one continuous length that went the entire bed, and you can see it kind of sneaking through here. This was a delight to find. I planted seed baby potatoes here about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and they finally came through the soil while I was gone. So that's always fun to see something new. And one of the grapes is dying back, so I think that's just a seasonal thing, but losing the leaves there. And you can see the soaker hose kind of made its way through the tomatoes and the basil, through the squash, all the way through the arugula and to the beets. And the end was right here. So the end of the soaker hose is just a blunt end, and that just allows the pressure to stay constant and let it seep out of the mesh. Definitely soaker hose for the win and timer for the win. I don't think I'm going to use a soaker hose to water my plants every single day. I like coming into the dome. I like tending to my plants, so I don't always want a fixed schedule. But when you're on a vacation and your options are have a fixed schedule of watering or hire someone to fully take care of your greenhouse, it's a little bit easier, I think more cost effective, to set up the automatic watering option. I was sort of monitoring the week before, so I decided that 15 was good for the larger bed, but the bed that doesn't have a lot of vegetation, I only had it on about 7 minutes. There's definitely things that needed watering there, but I didn't need 15 minutes worth of watering. I did bring in my mums from outside because I want to overwinter them in the dome. It's a time of year where it gets really cold outside. While we were gone, we did have our lowest temperature ever in the dome and outside of the dome. Forecast had called for 20 degrees or 25 degrees outside, but at our house it went down to 15 degrees. 15 degrees is the coldest weather we've seen so far with the whole dome. So I was nervous about it, and I was wondering how the dome was going to perform inside, because we don't have any supplemental heat at this point. We just have the GAT fan, which will blow all this hot air midday down underground, and it's sort of superheating the ground. So superheating the ground is keeping it a lot warmer in here, and that's the effect that we had. The dome did go down to about 42 degrees inside, and that's the lowest temperature it's ever been in here. So it was an interesting experiment, although a little bit concerning, because what if it dropped down to 10 degrees or 5 degrees? Would we hit freezing temperatures in the dome? That's more information that we need to document and track and have a plan for. So although I'm glad that we had an automated watering system, I'm also glad that we had an app where we could also monitor temperature. Now, there wasn't anything I could really do about the temperature other than maybe call a friend and have them hook up a heater. That's something I could have done. It's nice to be able to monitor what's going on in the dome, even though we were far away. Things did okay, even though I wasn't here to hands-on take care of everything. I think what's going to be coming up for this next week is a little bit more maintenance on the ground. We got some mulch glue that can help keep these black stones from traveling outside of the cracks, and they'll kind of fix them more into place. And I want to finally plant my vines. I've got some vines that are still in pots, and they're over here, and I need to put those in the ground. And I think I'm going to plant some seedlings, take a chance and see if I can grow some more herbs before the cold winter hits. So I'm going to see if I can germinate some seeds in here. It's definitely humid enough, especially on the south wall. We are getting still tons of sun. And because that fan is running, I know right here, it means it's over 80 degrees right now in the dome. So that's sort of the update from this week in Dome Diaries, folks. If you don't know about Dome Diaries, it's where I give an update about weekly, although I missed last week because we're on vacation, trying to give a regular update of what it's like keeping a 30-foot garden dome through the year at high altitude in a place where we have winter 6 months out of the year. You know, we're getting snow from October all the way through May sometimes. Can we maintain a tropical environment in the Rocky Mountains? Well, definitely stay tuned and let me know what questions you have about keeping a dome or a greenhouse or building one like this where it can be tropical. Love to answer questions for you, and let me know if there's anything that you'd like to see. I'm definitely open to trying some new things in the dome, but I think the next project is going to be, like I said, planting some seeds, trying to get some germination in here for some herbs or some leafy greens, some cool weather plants, and maybe some more flowers as well. So anyhow, that is the update from the dome, folks. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.